everyone. Today, our guest is Harun Raja. He has his own martial arts facility. Me and Harun, like, we kind of got acquainted through one of our mutual friends, Asad Patel. He has his own Straight Path podcast, and that's where Brother Harun talked about, being health and fitness and spirituality, how that comes into play. We're here today with Harun to talk about endurance. Like, what does endurance mean? What is an endurance athlete? And when we think about endurance athletes, we always talk about triathlons, MMA fighters, people who are just constantly going at it without any break or without any to an extent where like they can't even pause. When you think about sports like basketball, soccer, or any other sport, players on an individual basis, they do get some kind of a break. They're always like either they have to sprint and then they like come back, they kind of chill out for a little bit and they go on it. So we're here to talk about with the Harun about like what endurance actually means. And to start us off, how did you get into it? Where did your story begin, your journey? How did you kind of like, decide that this is where you wanna make a career out of, this is what you want to do?
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Um, I started training in the martial arts since I was a kid, and then I went on to competing, and I competed from ages 15 to 21 in Muay Thai at an amateur level, and then at 23 I opened up a school. So from 23 years old till almost the last 10 years, I was out of the game as far as having anything physically to push me or having kind of any kind of a challenge, because I focused a lot of my 20s, mid 20s, and then my early 30s on my career, trying to build a business, alhamdulillah, trying to get it to where it can become some form of a good residual income. And then fast forward now to be able to take care of my family. And so I kind of got the itch when a lot of other uh, gentlemen who are within the same field as I am, but who are kind of considered kind of retired. They don't really, they're out of the fight game. They started to do a lot of these triathletes. They started to do a lot of the Spartan races. They started to do a lot of these runs. And what really hit me was the pandemic, 2020 February, coming back from Bangkok, Thailand, where before the pandemic hit, I was in Thailand and I had a very intensive training camp in Muay Thai. And then when I came back, the whole world just shut down, obviously, as we know. And so I kind of went into not so much as a depression, but I went into a phase where I kept getting an itch of the training that I got in Thailand, and everything was shut down. Of course, I have a gym, but seminars was shut down, cross training with other people, athletes, all that was put on a pause due to the pandemic and due to Corona. So I just started to run, and 5 miles I would put in weekly anyway, became 10 miles, became 15 miles for fun.
Mm-hmm.
And, I kind of just decided, okay, I think the strength and conditioning coach that I have has developed my legs to a point where the running is not hurtful. It's actually a lot of fun. And then I started getting adrenaline rush and a high off of it. And then I kind of started to feel that win-loss type of crazy feeling that a lot of athletes feel, which is why they become combat athletes, which is why they become into sports in general. It's just kind of that kind of adrenaline feeling of oh man, can I do it? This is really a push, that heart to heart talk that you got to give yourself to really get through a certain struggle that you have in your life. And that's kind of what birthed the whole endurance athlete thing.
That's awesome. I mean, that's amazing. And again, the pandemic, like, everyone hates it. It kind of like messed up the lives. But in reality, a lot of credit goes to the pandemic for changing a lot of things in different people's lives. Like people started getting creative with their workouts. People like yourself, you said your 5 miles turned into 15 miles. A lot of people just like practice at home. Spartan and Tough Mudder, they came out with like these virtual at home events where you gotta like get those medals and those things. That's pretty interesting to see that you're also one of them, and you kind of like made something out of it, and you didn't just stick to it in the pandemic. Now you're kind of like enjoying it as part of your workout routine. Now before we like talk about more into detail about endurance, I want you to give me a breakdown of what is your understanding of what conditioning means. A lot of times when you talk about strength, it comes to like weightlifting, like anything that's resistance involved and so on. Conditioning, from my understanding, is something that like allows you to be constantly moving, functional. Like you're constantly like your heart rate's at a good pace. You're not like, let's say, for example, the basic one, going up and down the stairs. If you're not out of breath, you're really well conditioned.
Right. Yeah. I think that's a perfect definition in itself. But just kind of even if I were to make it more simpler, anything that puts the body into a certain amount of stress
Mm.
that you're not used to on your daily basis. So where you have a simple commute, walking back and forth from your work to your home, now you'll sprint, and just doing something like that, or working on something that's kind of out of your norm of your regular heart rate and of your regular regimen, is considered conditioning. And then there's different forms of conditioning, and you could just kind of look at the definition of someone who's conditioned. That's someone who's kind of withstand a lot of stress, a lot of workout, to be able to meet a specific need, whether it's a sport that they're trying to achieve a certain athletic ability as, or just a personal goal. So yeah, just putting the body through stress, putting the body through stress, and really just taking yourself out of your comfort zone a little bit, so that when you return to whatever daily lifestyle or goal you may have, it is something that you can withstand and maybe surpass, if that
Absolutely.
makes any sense.
No,
Yeah.
of course it does. And now one thing that's really interesting to me is that, at least from my understanding, correct me if I'm wrong, endurance is something very similar, but endurance also opens up a whole different avenue. Like the other day I was
Yeah.
reading something where it was like, if you're doing a workout, let's say you're on a bike or you're running, and your body's in really good shape, like you're not fatigued or you're not tired, but suddenly you're like out of breath, you're literally about to throw up, and that means your endurance training needs to be improved. That means you're not capable of like pushing yourself enough, even though your body is in that state. Your internal organs, as you would say, are like, they're done, they're just exhausted. So is that what endurance actually is? You're going to break down for us what endurance means and how it is very similar or different to conditioning?
Yeah, so endurance is just working specifically on stamina, anything cardiovascular related. So to say you're an athlete, yeah, somebody who plays golf could be considered an athlete. Somebody plays
Sure.
table tennis, and I'm not knocking on any of those sports, but somebody who plays table tennis could be an athlete. Somebody
Hey,
who does
Formula One drivers, they're considered
right.
athletes.
There you go. You're sitting down,
Yeah,
but you're an athlete because it's considered an athlete. So whether they're getting into endurance is clearly not as much as maybe now someone who's a marathon runner, an MMA fighter, a wrestler, a boxer, a Spartan athlete. Now here they're working on something that is more cardiovascular and built to strengthen their stamina. So the conditioning could be narrowed down to body parts. If there's specific muscle groups that you need to work on for, let's say, your career or for your sport, and then endurance is the stamina aspect behind it. The putting more gas in your tank is what I call it, to be able to have more stamina if whatever you're doing requires more cardiovascular stamina and strength. So that's what
absolutely.
endurance is. Yeah.
Absolutely. And I appreciate you breaking that down for us, because I mean, people need to know, like, everyone think that conditioning comes with it, but it's really not. That you have to train, you have to strengthen, condition, and also build your endurance. They're not gonna come together
Yeah.
in any shape or form. You have to like kind of focus on it. Now, you've been through martial arts, you've done the Spartan races, you've done the triathlons. How does your personal specifically, and then you can also get into a little bit of a general idea of like, how does the training, endurance training specifically, differ from each sport?
Um, when you're looking at something like triathletes, marathon runners, and then Spartan races, and even Spartan races are also different too. So the one I recently did was more of a mountain trail run,
Okay.
and then the one I did, this one in particular, that's is blue and it's kind of hard to see. This had obstacle courses in them.
Okay.
So now you're approaching it a totally different way. If I'm doing a race that I know is going to involve calisthenics, meaning that I'm going to have to use my body, I'm going to have to
Sure.
use my upper body strength, lower body strength, then the conditioning aspect behind it is going to be more so based off of weightlifting, Olympic weightlifting, and building those joints and muscle groups up for the things that I'll face in these obstacle courses, such as rope climbs,
Mm-hmm.
medicine ball carries, climbing walls and stuff. When you're dealing with things like marathon running, that's all you're doing is you're just running. So now we're talking about how can we condition the legs to where they kind of go, for lack of a better word, numb, to
Sure.
where you don't really feel the pain in them, and now you're focusing more on just your stamina. So now you have to approach it in the way where, okay, my feet, my running, my agility, my leg strength, not so much as an upper body strength, but just more of my legs, my cardio, my endurance, doing intervals where it's 1 minute fast, 1 minute slow, 1 minute fast, 1 minute slow, and just things like that to build your stamina. And then, like, if I'm approaching a fight, when I used to fight amateur Muay Thai, that's also different too. That I would say, in my personal opinion, and I'm not just being biased, but a fighter has kind of the whole package where there is a strength and conditioning program, there is an endurance program, there's a diet involved, there's striking classes and sparring involved, there's wrestling classes and grappling involved. So striking and then grappling, that's two different workouts in itself.
Sure.
Ask any fighter. So you have a more of a mixed level of fitness that you need to meet for that, to be able to last 3 minute rounds or 3 5 minute rounds, whatever it is. It's going to be a totally different game plan.
I mean, for marathon, you said it's pretty straightforward. For Spartan races, you're involving some obstacle work like farmer carries or like ball carries, just build that conditioning and the stamina for that. Now, when it comes to MMA is still a little bit quicker compared to boxing. Does boxing require a lot more effort in stamina compared to MMA?
Absolutely, because here where the cadence can change a little bit in mixed martial arts, where and you see it a lot too, where I'm striking, and if the person is not a good striker, I can boom, I can
Yeah,
immediately grab the person, I can
yeah,
take him to the ground, and now whether the ref or the audience sees it or not, that fighter is getting their breath back. So
right.
there's a little bit of a cadence change, even though now they're going to change to more of a different type of breathing and
Sure.
grappling. And then your breathing is different when you're vertical. I'm standing, I'm striking, than I
Hmm.
am horizontal
Sure.
when I'm on the ground and I'm grappling. Whereas boxing now, this is all I got, and so it's more based off of just my as punching as much as I can, and then my footwork and my stamina. So I would say they're all equally, respectably challenging in their own unique way. Yeah, I have to hit it. I really have to give my hats off to boxers, and I would say even more than just some of our kickboxing
Yeah.
matches, because the boxers professionally still go 10 rounds, 15
Yeah.
rounds. I mean, they can still go so many rounds, and taking that beating, and then the cadence changing with that, it's you barely get any break. And if you do, it's for a minute or so in that corner between rounds, and then that's it. So yeah, for sure, boxing is definitely going to be a more of a cardio kick as far as striking goes, I would say, than MMA would, where you have differences in between the two games, because one, you're allowed to grapple, you're allowed to go on the ground. Okay, now I can get my breath a little bit and change my game up. And you hear fighters talk about that strategy all the time, where
Sure.
if I'm dealing with a striker, okay, good, I'm going to go and I'm going to take him down, and I don't have to worry about his striking, and I can work something that maybe I'm better at cardio at. So they have different game plans and different methods of approaching both sports.
But shifting a little bit off topic, I mean, you've probably seen in the past, and it's pretty much in the mainstream media, like MMA fighters, UFC fighters like Tyson Woodley, Conor McGregor, they've tried their hand at boxing, and well, we all know how that turned out. Does
Right,
that means like, would you credit that to just because it's a whole different sport that they're getting into? It was something to do with the training, or like, does that actually impact, if you're an MMA fighter yourself, for example, right? You're in Muay Thai, you're in martial arts. Now, if you decide to go to boxing, do you think it's going to take a toll on you? You're going to have to change your training from scratch, or just some tweaks here and there? And if done right, you can have success. Where does your, like, what do you think, and what have you seen in your circles?
a lot of people approach the combat sports and then just kind of paint a generalization over it,
Mhm.
saying that we're all punching and kicking, so it's all got to be the same.
Mhm.
But people fail to understand there's 1,000 different styles of
Right.
martial arts in general, and then combative sports. There's even more different types of venues of combative sports, such as judo matches, taekwondo matches, karate matches, kickboxing matches, Muay Thai kickboxing matches, wrestling matches, Russian sambo matches, There's so many.
Yeah.
Um, and I would consider it like Jordan. You
Sure.
know, you saw him play basketball, and when his father died, you know, he made that transition to baseball. And I don't know if you had an opportunity to see that
Yeah,
documentary
yeah,
about
the
him.
last times, absolutely. Yep.
So that's a perfect example where in that documentary he's talking about how he had to change his body up as a baseball player
Sure.
because his basketball body shape was not going to fit that sport. Likewise, then when he went back
You had
to
to
playing
switch it up again. Yep.
basketball, he had to switch it up again. So just like respectively, you would treat all the intramural sports or any sports that involve a ball. Yeah, the combat world is the same thing too.
Sure.
You would definitely have to change up your game plan, and you would definitely have to change how you approach, you know, your striking. You know, if I'm a wrestler and then I have a boxing matchup, I'm going to have a big problem if I can't stand up on my own 2 feet and my arms are not conditioned to punch some 30, 40 times in a 3-minute round.
Yeah.
If I'm a boxer and I have to grapple, yeah, I'm going to have a hard time if I don't have the endurance to be able to catch and grab somebody. Or even if you want to stick within training, if I'm a kickboxer going to boxing, now I've got to make sure that my feet are more conditioned for more footwork rather than being able to, you know, rely on my kicks and knees. And so there's a kind of funny story. There's a pro boxer at our gym, and
Okay.
I get my butt handed to him all the time because, you know, he's a boxer, but he won't come into my world, but I'll come into his world, but he will not come into my world because he knows I'm a kicker. Okay. And he doesn't want to get kicked in the leg because there's nothing he can do about it.
Yeah.
But for a personal challenge, I fight him and I spar him a couple of times, and
You know,
he's
and
8-0.
like a pure boxing style
Yeah,
sparring.
boxing, and I do it because I know I'm going to get my butt handed to me, but I purposely do it because I know it'll teach me a lesson and teach me to respect the hands. Where in a sport where we're allowed more than just the hands, I may not respect somebody's 1-2 as much as I would a boxer, which that's all they know. So clearly, his jab cross is going to be way better than mine because I can elbow, I can knee, I can kick, I can clinch, I can dump, and then if I'm an MMA fighter, I can go to the ground.
Sure.
If that's not a teaching lesson there, I don't know what is, you know.
No, absolutely. And I think that's really interesting, like for the audience listening and the people in general to understand that, like in the combat sports, just because you are on top of the game in MMA doesn't mean you will be on top of the game in boxing. And it's just so
Right.
on the opposite, it's like because of whole different dynamics. It's maybe might have like a little bit of foundation that might be similar, but from what I'm understanding is that your training is going to be different, your nutritional approach is going to be different, which brings me to my next question. How does nutrition differ? You've been through 3 different sports, you've trained for them all, you've competed them all. How has your approach towards nutrition been when you're in season or training for a competition versus when you're just like, just in off season, just trying to maintain your fitness?
I really never took nutrition seriously till after my own personal battle with cancer.
Right.
After that happened about some 7, 8 years ago, I really had to approach my diet and say, okay, where did I kind of go wrong? Thinking that the typical mentality, eat whatever you want because you're
Just put
working
in the
out.
work.
So it's just,
Yeah.
yeah, right.
And
You're
that's
putting
like
the
that's like
gas.
the quote unquote like the dream that people want.
Yeah,
Hey, I want to be
you
able
know,
to work out and eat
if
whatever I
only,
want.
right? If only our body worked that way. But I treated it that way, and when I would fight in amateur, of course, I would cut weight, but my metabolism was such that because of fasting, and
Mhm.
in particular doing something called intermittent fasting, I was able to drop the weight usually no problem, just that week of by maybe limiting to only one meal, still continuing my training, and then the day of the fight, I would blow it back up, and it'd be no problem. So the methodology as far as diet goes depends on the person's particular metabolism and particularly what's their weight class when they're fighting.
Sure.
And usually some of the guys, the amateur guys, after the second or third fight, they can understand their body a little bit better and understand weight cutting. But in personally, it's a sore subject for a lot of people regarding
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
health pros and cons of cutting weight. Now in my kind of quote unquote retired. Of course, I never went pro, so I don't really consider
Sure.
myself retired of anything.
Yeah.
Um,
You're still in the game.
I yeah, I approach the fitness differently depending on what I have coming up. So if it's something endurance wise, I know that I need carbs. Where most of the time I cut out a little bit of carbs, or I go a little bit more keto or low carb when it comes to combat sports or cutting weight or getting lean. Now, to hell with the way you look like, it's going to be more for fuel.
Sure.
So when we're talking about fuel and being able to burn as many calories as you burn, um, I mean, sometimes it's 2,300 calories that I'll burn over a half marathon.
Yeah.
So I have to make sure that I have enough fuel and endurance during my training sessions to train for that half marathon. And then during the half marathon, I've got snacks and things that I'm eating while I'm running, and a Camelback, which has water in it to where
Yep.
I can keep that going. Antioxidants, sorry, not antioxidants, but electrolytes,
Sure. Sure.
potassium, things like that. So it's just going to be a different approach. What's more streamlined between everything, though, is just mainly a high protein diet,
Mm.
and kind of low carb. For the most part, is what I do. I find that if I stay that way, I can be ready for any specific sport, mainly at any time. If I'm competing, obviously it's a different story because I have to cut weight.
Sure.
Um, but yeah, it's different depending on what approach or what event you have. But for the most part, just high protein, staying away from the oil, staying away from the sugar, staying away from the fats for the most part, and then make sure your proteins are good, clean sources. If you carb, make sure it's good, clean carbs that are that kind of burn a little bit slower than usual. That's more fuel and reserves in your body for whatever you have to perform.
Absolutely. And it's really interesting to me because like doing endurance workouts myself, I'm really big on all aspects of it. I personally love to play sports. I play soccer. I play a little bit of volleyball. Just had a ACL surgery recently, but
Oh wow!
one thing I did my best is that to try to stay in shape, to keep my conditioning up, and like literally like probably like 8 about 8 to between 8 and 12 weeks when I was back to like doing my biking and my regular stuff. I was really happy to know that I'm not running out of breath. I'm not like
Yeah,
because like that was important for me.
absolutely.
And I know that when you come from a small break or when you do something that requires so much effort, just endurance
Yeah,
training, you burn tons of calories.
yeah,
And if you
absolutely.
don't
Yeah,
eat for your body to be fueled rightly, I'm pretty sure you're not going to have a success in training or even competing as such. And as you said, weight cutting is a very I know the whole
yeah.
process they do in the MMA is like the
It's
towels,
terrible.
the cold
Yeah,
bath, the hot, the steam. So
it's tough. It's really
so
tough.
props,
It's the
props to yeah,
only aspect
yeah.
of combat sports that I really cringe. But I feel like the victory of whatever you've achieved that night makes up for it. But it's
Yeah,
tough.
absolutely.
It's tough to. I
Absolutely.
mean,
It
it's
is. I
tough.
mean,
I tell you,
again, you're talking about combat sports, but like I think we can give credit to the bodybuilders too. When they come to
yeah,
that
sure,
one specific time, they'll have no water, completely what they call like
right,
dry
right,
physique,
right.
like nothing. And then suddenly
Yeah,
there's the
dry.
next day they're just like up there. So it's pretty impressive that how the human body can do it. And for the audience listening, this is just information. It's not like you should do it. Like if you want to lose weight, I don't think me or Harun would recommend that you just do like a weight cut and
Oh
suddenly
no,
starve
no,
yourself
no, no,
to
no.
like get down to 10 pounds. What would you say on average a athlete or a fighter overnight cuts down like what 8 pounds to
Yeah, I've through. I mean, from what I've seen, and then what I've seen some of my fighters seen, and that I've kind of cornered and coached. Man, you'd be surprised. It just depends. If their age is like 20,
yeah
these guys can shred. Yeah, 5, 8 pounds. It's just amazing. Maybe just by staying in the sauna or running that day with a hot sauna suit, or just yeah, like I said, not eating or not drinking water. Especially guys.
yeah
Guys end up. It's just seems for some reason it seems a little bit more easier for guys to lose weight than female fighters. But
sure
yeah, they yeah, that's about right. Yeah.
yeah I know we are talking a little bit off topic, but it's really interesting to me because like I've been watching this documentary on Netflix called Drive to Survive. It's about the Formula One, their race. It's like literally everything Formula One. It's they're
Oh, okay.
like all from the races, the personalized drivers and everything. So there they state a fact that the drivers they always like do a weigh in before and after the race. So they
Yeah.
have to
Wow.
make a specific weight because the car is built to their weight. Even if they're
Oh,
like a
wow.
pound more or less, that impacts the way they drive.
No, I wouldn't. I would have
And
never known that. Wow.
the another interesting thing is that they sweat so much, especially if they're in like the Middle East
Yeah.
racing, they
Oh,
lose
yeah.
about like 2 to 3 pounds within that race after they come off. So
Wow.
when they
Wow.
weigh in after the race,
And
in
they're
Las
all suited
Vegas.
up, right? So they have
Yep,
the
suited up,
helmet and
and
yeah,
especially in like the
wow.
Middle East, like if they're in Dubai or Qatar or any
Oh
of those
yeah,
places,
yeah,
they lose a lot of like 2, 3 couple pounds. So that's really interesting.
yeah.
It kind of reminded me of the weight cut.
Very, very
It's very
interesting.
like
Yeah,
it's very straining on the body. Now, how over
absolutely.
time, over the past years that you've been training, and you've been, and of course, I'd imagine if you tell me no, then you're probably like, I'll call you like a superhuman. But I'd imagine in all
Okay.
these sports, there's definitely been certain injuries that have kind of impacted the way you've trained, impacted you've approached these things. How has that been for you? What has been the most challenging thing for you, and how you overcome that?
Ironically enough, illness is just cancer. But I will still tell people to this day, having flat feet and plantar fasciitis is the worst pain ever.
Mm,
If you can imagine, I do all the stuff that a flat footer shouldn't do. I run, I kick, I just you name it. And my doctor for my foot, when I went to go check him out, he said, "Man, you've been flat feet all along, and you do all this for a career, and you're just now starting to feel pain," which was about maybe 10 years ago. I found out I was flat footed
mhm.
and I needed orthopeds and inserts.
Sure.
So making that switch to be able to taking my orthopeds out every tennis shoe that I buy and putting them back in, and then wrapping my feet a certain way at night and keeping it elevated, and then RICE is the acronym,
Yep.
as we
Yep.
say,
Yep.
rest,
Rest eyes,
ice,
compress.
compression, and elevation.
Yep.
So doing that, that when not gone diagnosed, it'll just ride up like an elevator. So if you don't take care of your plantar fasciitis, then your Achilles will be the next thing to go, and then it'll just ride up to your knee, where you get a lot of ACL problems, and then of course
Sure.
towards your IT band, and then your hip.
Yep.
So
Yep.
my biggest problem was always been flat footer, and it really kind of affected me in my mid-20s. That was the worst pain ever. And getting over that was just, again, like I was saying, seeing the podiatrist,
Sure.
seeing the getting my orthopedic insoles, getting the right kind of shoes, making sure I stretch my feet a little way, making sure I invest in a chiropractor,
Hmm.
and making sure I invest in a great sports therapeutic masseuse. And I have two great guys that
Sure.
take care of both of those things for me. Was the biggest game changer. Matter of fact, my chiro that I originally started off with is paying me a visit tomorrow night from Oregon. He's well known
Wow.
around the world to adjust a lot of fighters and a lot of coaches, and we're inviting him for dinner tomorrow. So we always talk about this. That was the worst probably pain ever, because when gone unnoticed, like I did ignorantly in my 20s, 20s you think you're Superman, so you
That's
just
awesome.
you let it go. That was the worst pain. I would say the second would be, you know, my body reacting to the fact that I had a tumor, which is
Sure.
what started my cancer journey, and me neglecting that. And, without going into too much information or TMI, it pretty much my right testicle was as big as a grapefruit, and I just let it go. I just kind of, like any jockhead, hey, just put some ice on it, you'll be fine. You know what I mean?
Wow.
And I just kind of let that kept going and still do all my sports. And I remember that there was nights where I just couldn't figure out why that particular area of my body was hurting so bad, even though clearly you could see there was something wrong and it was
Sure.
bigger than normal. So those two things I would say would probably be my toughest kind of battles physically, as far as painful goes, to try to overcome.
So, but really good to know that you didn't have any serious like an ACL or like a hamstring tear or like any upper body tears or like any of that throughout your career.
No, I'm developing arthritis in my shoulders now. So I
That's
have a
probably because
chiro
of
that,
the long-term impact of,
yeah,
which
yeah.
is
So
probably like same
now,
as like football players or like anyone that's
right.
gonna be an impact sport. Yep.
Yeah. So that's what I'm starting to feel in my mid 30s now. But alhamdulillah, miraculously, I've played it safe as far as no serious injuries or surgeries that have put me out. Even I've been knocked out a couple of
Yeah, like I
times,
would be
and
surprised. Most common is what I've seen, like a lot of rib cage injuries that come in, and
right.
a
Yeah.
lot of
Yeah.
like
No.
grappling and like some arm twists, some elbows. So some
No,
of
I'm
those.
okay, man. I'm okay for the most part.
That's
Or
that's
either they're
amazing.
broken and I don't know about it. That's probably the other reason too. So
Hey, if you've been able to come this far without any injuries, man, like you really need to. That means you're definitely like stretching out. You're doing your proper
I'm doing.
pre
I hope so.
pre
Yeah.
training routine. That's really impressive. A
Inshallah.
lot of people kind of like skip on that till later on.
Inshallah. Yeah,
And
yeah,
so,
yeah.
so what would you say, like going through all the challenges, what has been the most challenging sporting event for you? Like, what was the most challenging sporting event that you had to train for or compete while you were dealing with some of this?
Um, I would say the first time I fought. The first
Okay.
time I fought was, I mean, and any fighter will tell you this. You're going to get butterflies in the locker room on your way up to the fight, and then you're gonna get,
And this is Muay Thai.
yeah, kickboxing. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
First time I fought in general, and just
Sure. Sure.
and this was yeah, just the first time I fought in general, fighting somebody. It was scared because this person is trying to beat you in front of a live audience, and
Sure.
somebody's going to get embarrassed, and people are going to see that, and a lot of thoughts go through your mind. But I would say that first fight that I had, I won by a decision. Um, was And even after the win, just the overwhelming emotion that kind of took over me
Hmm.
really didn't hit, that I just did what I just did, that your normal average person just doesn't want to do
Sure.
until the day after. And that's usually when you start to feel the injuries of, oh, I must have got kicked because I feel it now. I must have got hit here because I feel it now. Um, that was pretty tough. And then definitely my first Muay Thai camp. And what a Muay Thai camp is our particular organization. It's called the World Thai Boxing Association, WTBA.
Okay.
It was brought and founded by the man who brought Muay Thai to the United States, who's my instructor. His name is Master Chai.
Okay.
So he created a camp where he gets 150 to 200 of the world's best kickboxers, athletes, and we train on a mountain very close to Mount St. Helens in Oregon in July, in the middle of nowhere in Oregon. And we do this once
Wow.
a year. COVID put a stop to it the past 2 years, but the first camp that I did, you're literally training 8 hours, 3 sessions, about an hour break in between each session, from anywhere from 80, you can imagine, to 90 rounds
I
a
actually
day.
didn't know that. That's pretty cool actually to think about,
Yeah,
that kind of like
yeah.
separate practice.
Yeah, training camps like that was pretty intense. I was 20 at the time when I first went to that one, and that was also life changing. So I'd say those two things mentally built me
Mm.
somewhat strong to where, yeah, the Spartan race was hard approaching in my mid 30s, but I had more of a better mental approach because of what I put myself
You've you've
through in
you've
my
you've gone
20s.
through worse.
Right, right. Exactly, exactly. Yeah. So I would say those two things in my 20s was like, oh my gosh, I had to really rethink, why the hell am I doing? Like, is this sane? Am I, is this a dream? And do I want?
Yeah.
I paid for this. Like, I volunteered for this. Why? So,
Yeah.
but now in hindsight, doing Spartan races, doing marathons, I've competed in other sports as well too. It has been a little bit more of an easier drive and approach than what
That's
it was
awesome.
when
I
I
mean,
first. Yeah.
that's really impressive to hear that, while you're dealing with a lot of your physical challenges, you're pushing yourself mentally. And would you say that that first fight or fighting in general, out of all the three sports that you've taken part in, is the most challenging to train for?
Yes, I would, and again, it's not just me being biased because I'm a fighter and a martial artist, but
Sure.
I just posted a quote from one of my coaches. This particular coach that I have, he's if you follow a lot of UFC fighters, he was Brock Lesnar's striking coach,
Okay.
and now he's Thug Rose. Yeah, he is her striking coach. His name is Greg
Wow.
Nelson. He's a two-time cancer survivor as well too. Really, just a phenomenal guy. He's got a good podcast out as well. He just put a quote, and I really live by this quote, and it says that fighting is the most wild thing you can do, but coming out of something like that where you're finding another physical human being who, which by the way, they're a martial artist as well, so they know how to fight, who, which
Sure.
by the way, has built their body into a weapon just like you, is in front of a live audience, probably is, it does something to the brain. It rewires the brain going into it and then coming out of it.
Mhm.
And I feel that when you do something like that, yeah, and I think I said this in Us's podcast too. Anything outside of that, whether it's family feuds or arguments outside between your brothers or your cousins or your siblings, or work or space or anything, just becomes very minute, very, very. insignificant. Life in general is a little bit more simpler, I
Sure.
think, for the people who walk the warrior path, just because of what they've done. It helps people. It helps them analyze the world a little bit more simpler. So that saying, to tying into your question, after I've done that, um, that would be the most challenging. It has given me the right mindset and framework for dealing with cancer, dealing with family members dying of cancer, dealing with family members dying with COVID-19, uh, dealing with the fact that maybe you're a specific person who people lean on to as a leader,
Mhm.
as someone for advice, as someone for strength, and then being able to deal with things like on a personal level, like building, being a good husband for your wife, being a good
Sure.
father for your kids, being a good community leader, and then being able to be an athlete to do stuff that you probably, in my 20s, I don't think I would ever think of. I used to hate running. I would have never thought I would do marathon running and Spartans and things like that. But definitely, fighting was is the most challenging, but I would say most rewarding thing. Even if you're a nobody like me and you've never made it in the big leagues like UFC, or got your name mentioned in conversations, it's still a very well
They're very
respected,
humbling.
win or lose. Yeah, win or lose. Very humbling.
Absolutely,
Absolutely.
absolutely. And now that I think you pretty much answered what I was going to ask you next is how does all this work out with you having your own martial arts facility, with you having your family and your training and stuff like that? Like, how do you manage it? I know part of it you already answered that, you're mentally so resilient. Alhamdulillah, like you're able to push yourself, but how does that, is there some sacrifices that you have? I'm pretty sure you had to make it in the past, but is there still some sacrifices that you're making right now? Or maybe right now you have it all in such a good flow that, everything's just working out for you.
It's easy to assume that, uh, because that's what you just said is what a lot of people assume now in hindsight, 12 years into this
Mm.
business. But no, that has never been the case, and that is not even the case now. Yeah, there's going to be some weekends I can't spend time with my family because I got to go compete. Yeah, there's going to be some late nights because I've got to be able to tend to my students and tend to my academy, and I can't tuck my kids in bed. Yeah, there's going to be some mornings where I'm not there in the morning to take them to school because I got to get my training in before the day starts and everyone else wakes up. Yeah, there's some foods I want to eat, but I can't eat them. Yeah, there's some dinner parties I'd like to go to, but I know that the peer pressure of going to those dinner parties and being able to eat foods that I'm not supposed to eat and being up late is going to ruin my sleep. I got to say no to. And and I don't mean this in a bad way at all, but even your social circle, there's
Yeah.
people in your social
Yeah.
circle that you just got to cut out because A, they just don't get it, B, they refuse to get it, or C, they're just not such of a positive motivating
Absolutely.
influence to help you tackle that goal that you need. You may have to cut them out and maybe approach them at another time in your life, or you replace them with other people that will help you for that specific goal that you got to work on for
Sure.
that time in your life. So yeah, there's tons of sacrifices that you've got to make. I would say faith, number one, hands down. If you have a certain purpose and you can tie it to your faith, that's your fuel that you need to tie in everything else. And then everything after that comes discipline, comes your your morals, your creeds, your values, your principles that'll all fall into place to help you be able to give and sacrifice the time you need, uh, and delegate into all the positions and hats that you might wear. Where if you're someone like me, you're a coach to women, you're a coach to kids.
Sure.
I'm a PE teacher in Islamic school. I'm a fighter as well.
Sure.
And then I've got a group that I play badminton with, and we compete and play badminton. I'm a father. I'm a son. I'm a husband.
Multiple
So
hats.
so yeah, right. So all those hats, absolutely. You just have to figure out a way to delegate those tasks, and build that positive environment around you to help you wear all those hats.
That's really impressive. That's really awesome. And the fact that, again, I think the audience already knows that you would give most of this credit to your early years developing, you said, going through those intense fight camps and understanding that, if I can get through this and everything else, I'm pretty sure I'll be able to manage. I'm pretty sure I'm gonna have that faith to get through things. So what is one
Absolutely.
advice you would give, or in general, you're not one advice necessarily, but something that you would say that for people who are trying to take this route, someone who wants to be a just into endurance based sports, whether it's triathlons, whether it's Spartan races, whether it's martial arts, what would you say they should begin with? And would you say should they focus on endurance only, or should they focus on strength, or should they focus on both? I know that one of the answers is probably going to be like, it's based off their goals. But let's say if someone wants to have the whole package, where do they begin?
I'll give the same advice that I gave my wife. My wife, at the birth of our second child, she took a health toll and had a high blood pressure,
Hmm.
Preeclampsia is what they call it.
Sure.
And so the doc told her she needs to find a form of exercise that she can do to help bring it down. Otherwise, she's going to be on meds. And she looked at me and the running that I'm doing, and she said, I want to get to that point too. And I told her start slow, baby steps. Yeah, I'll give you the generic answer of what you just said. Definitely figure out what it is that you want to do as far as an athlete or a personal goal or want to accomplish. Is it an athlete in combat sports? Now we're talking about a different game plan. Is it your endurance or your running? You're trying to be a runner. Now we're talking about something different. Is it a body style, a self-image thing that you're trying to get
Like
over with?
aesthetics, like just in a good shape, look good, feel
Aesthetics.
good.
Exactly. Then we're talking about also another avenue. But having that purpose first will give you a direction towards that pathway, and then all the obstacles that you need to get to that goal. Once you define that goal, if you're a marathon runner, I tell people if that's something you want to do and you want to start running and you're terrible at it, walk. Okay, do a walk. Make the walk become a brisk. Make the brisk become a trot. Make the trot become a jog, and make the jog become a run. And don't compare yourself to who's on your left and who's on your right. Try to just look at the person in the mirror. They have so many of these apps now that you can use that'll track your heart rate
Sure.
and track your pace. And then, just make it a goal that, what, I know that if I check the mail, I can get my car and drive there. I'm just going to run there this time. Or, Sundays, I've got nothing to do. Let me see if I can put in a mile. And then that's how you'll build yourself up. Man, I've seen it with my wife where a mile became 2, became 3, became 5Ks that
Sure.
she's doing. If it's a combat athlete, it is never too late. There's a big misconception that people think you just got to be in your 20s and 30s to be able to do martial arts. That's totally not true. All my superiors are in their 70s and 80s, and they're still doing seminars. They're still teaching seminars, and some of them are still learning new martial arts. So,
Sure.
it's hard for me to look at myself in my 30s or look at maybe the brother asking me this question or the sister, and they're in the 30s and 40s, and they're thinking they're too old. It's
Yeah.
not true. You're never too old. It's more of a mental thing. And then going based off of that, there's the only obstacle and hurdles that come is yourself and any self-doubt that comes out of for the lack thereof. Maybe you're making an excuse when really there's no excuse to be made. It's just like Nike, just do it. You know what I mean? So really it's just all about the individual, definitely the personal individual.
Absolutely. One thing I would definitely like to ask you is that as someone who's been in combat sports, how does strength training play a role? I've asked a few people this, and it's always good to know this different opinion because, for example, right, Nate Diaz. If you look at it, if I didn't know Nate Diaz was a UFC fighter, I probably would have be like, who's this guy? What is he gonna
Yeah.
do? Because he doesn't look like a fighter, And there's like a lot of people with that physique, like they got the skinny fat or like no muscle
Sure.
or like very extreme. Like you're like he can't be a fighter, but when they pack a punch, like they pack a punch. So how does that
Absolutely.
play into being in the combat sports?
On the best example of that actually was the Gracie fight, the first UFC fight where Gracie went against. He was going against Sean Shirk, and matter of fact, that grappling coach that trained Rose also trained Sean Shirk. And here you see a skinny Brazilian guy in a gi, and you have Sean Shirk, which is just you can look it up on YouTube. It's a historic fight because it's what put Gracie on the map.
Mhm.
You see this huge muscular guy, and you see this Gracie guy just using basic positioning and body structure and tapping this guy out, not even knocking him out, but just being able to get in there, get in the right position, and use his body for his specific technique of what he's good at to be able to take the bigger opponent down. Um, that broke the stereotype in the mold where people thought you have to be this bodybuilder to be able to be, this great fighter like a Brock Lesnar, or something like that. Again, nothing, not racking on Brock Lesnar. I'd hate to see him if I ever said anything bad about him. But if you look at Brock for a while there had a lot of problems with his gas.
I mean, he was a wrestler,
He
so
was a wrestler, so
yeah.
you're talking about a different cadence.
I mean,
But
in
again,
that in wrestling, you need to have a little bit of mass. Like you need to be a little bit
right.
big. Yeah.
So you see, it's different when it translates into more of the combative role, where now we're talking about wrestling, but we're talking about punching, kicking, and stuff like that. The strength and conditioning that's done for a lot of the fighters is very similar to the strength and conditioning that's done for the people who play ball. I just need something that makes my arm faster and harder when I make impact. I don't need my bicep to be bigger than my head, and
You
I
don't need
don't
the
need to
muscle
have
mass.
right. I don't need it. There's so many examples of that. Khabib is actually a perfect example because if you
Yeah.
look at a lot of Khabib's fighters that he fought in his Army days and then in his first couple of professional fight days in the UFC, they were huge.
Yeah.
They were way more bigger than him, yet he's dominating, and he could take a shot from them,
Sure.
and he still has enough power to take the shot. So the strength and conditioning that's approached with combat sports is going to be for what they need to use, not for a particular talent and look. And let's face it, if I'm a big guy, it's going to take just as much oxygen to pump to that big muscle. That's just going to make me even more winded to be able to endure that fight. So you're looking at a fighter's body is going to be definitely something different than a bodybuilder, definitely
Sure.
something different than a wrestler, different than a ball player. It's all different because the games are different. But yeah, so that person, I can tell you a little bit. Just kind of what I do is we do a lot of cable,
Mhm.
drills where we're pulling on the cable, a
Instrument.
lot
Yep.
of
Okay.
isometric drills where we're building that quick twitch muscles.
Sure.
We're doing a lot of stuff with I have the free weights in my hand and now I'm mimicking shadow boxing. We're doing a lot of stuff where there's someone on the other end and I'm forced to push while I feel gravity pushing me this way. So just drills like that and then along with hitting the bag, along with going in and punching and translating all that working out to this fast twitch muscle to develop this good punch. Same thing with my kicking. So it is different. It's definitely different as a fighter body than anyone else.
Nah, and I appreciate you shedding some light on that because the media, like stereotype, like you see people uh, like I mean, of course, boxing is a whole different story because boxing again, you need to have some mass, you need to have some. But even in boxers, there's a lot of skinny boxers like Ryan
Yeah, there's different weight
Garcia,
classes, right?
and
Yeah,
yeah, there's
different weight classes,
yeah,
and
like
yeah,
you don't see them to
absolutely.
be like so. You don't need the stereotype that people have that you need to be extremely athletic, like ripped or jacked or shredded to be
Right.
even be in the ring is totally wrong. And I kind of like that broke my misconception seeing people like
Yeah.
Nate Diaz and all the other fighters who are like strong, but
I
you don't
mean,
it doesn't
it's
show in
it's
their appearance per se.
and there's different metabolisms. There's different metabolisms. It could be, and I've seen this happen to some people. I am not one of those people. I'll just tell you right now. But that all the strength training that they're doing, and maybe they're following their diet 50% or maybe 20%, just happened to make them that ripped. But they didn't go out of their way and do 50 crunches that night because they knew they were going to be on TV with their shirt off.
Right,
And
sure.
then there are some people where they're like, no, I'm going to be on a live audience, or if it's on TV, I want to make sure I look good as I train. So I will go out of my way and specifically lose that weight. And then there's some that are like, no, I want to be comfortable in my
I just want to
body
fight.
because, yeah, I just want to fight. Yeah,
Like
that's
you
it.
have
My job.
so many examples come to
Exactly.
mind, right? You have the Ruiz versus Anthony Joshua fight, boxing that happened a few years ago.
Yeah.
Actually, 2 years ago. If you remember, if I don't know if you've seen it, but he is like Ruiz is like he's a big guy, like he's a chubby big guy. And then the most recent, you have Wilder Fury.
Wilder and Fury.
Like
Yeah.
that's like
Mm-hmm.
same weight class, but
You
totally
know,
different physiques. Like
it's
this is
different.
one guy with like no offense, but like a blob of fat, and then
Yeah.
the other guy was just like completely shredded.
I mean, I don't know. This is probably revealing my age, but some of the early days in UFC and some of the early days in Pride, which was big back before
Yeah,
UFC. Fedor was before Khabib came along. Fedor Emelianenko was one of my favorite fighters. Man, Fedor always had that. You know, I don't know if he drank, but he always had that beer belly. You know what I mean? Just
yeah,
that big belly. But man, he had hammers in his fist. I mean, he would
yeah.
knock you to tomorrow. And there would have been a couple of times where he's fought guys just ripped. I mean, you couldn't even pinch the skin off of their bodies,
Right.
and boom, knock the guy out, no problem. You know what I mean? It's
Yeah.
just it's different.
It's a different. It's very interesting how the sport is so much more than just how your body looks. Now, I know we've talked a lot about endurance sports. We've talked a lot about aesthetics and how nutrition diet plays a role. But before I let you go, I have one final question for you. One
Okay.
person, dead or alive, that you would want to train with or wanted to train with.
If there was the question is, if there was a person that was dead or alive, who would
That
that
it
be
could
that I
be
want to
anyone. It
train
could
with?
be a role model. It could be a celebrity. It could be anyone. It could be from any aspect of life, from any walk of life.
I think we've always heard stories about just how great of a Sahaba he is, and how he was a wrestler. And I think if I could meet Omar bin Khattab or Khalid bin Walid, I think that would be dope, because these guys, some of their stories that I used to read and listen to growing up was how I made the connection to faith to what I do as a career. Um, so if we're going into people that I really look up to as far as the dean goes, definitely that. And then of course I'll give you the generic answer. Bruce Lee would be great. To learn from him. I'm fortunate I learned from one of his proteges,
Okay.
Dan Inosanto, who's
Wow.
86
Okay.
years old. Yeah. Muhammad Ali. Some of these guys are would be awesome. But definitely, I think to tie in the faith aspect and get some of that training and just rub shoulders with these greats, man, would be great. Any of those
Absolutely.
Sahabas, man, that you hear back during our Prophet peace be upon him's time. Umar bin Khattab, Khalid bin Walid, all these guys. I think that'd be awesome.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for sharing that. Now, for the audience, if they're interested to know more about how you train or if you're coaching, where can they find you?
I'm on Instagram at #Raja Academy. And then I'm also on Facebook at my name. So it's Harun, and then Raja. There's a nickname that I have called Sagat. If you're a Street Fighter fan, then you'll know. So
Yeah, yes, I
it's just
got the
parentheses. Yeah,
I
yeah. It's just Sagat as a nickname. That's not my name, but that's a nickname that I've always had. So you can find me on Facebook, and then I always play things really, really good by text at my number, which is
absolutely.
eight six four.
And if you want to give out your number, they can
Yeah,
connect through me, or it's up to you, your number,
yeah,
email.
we'll just do that. Yeah, I'll have them connect my
Yeah,
number through you. But most of the time, social media is really, really good. Just it's definitely Instagram and definitely Facebook. I stay busy with teaching, but I also travel and teach seminars as well.
sure.
I do a lot of these podcasts and things like that as well too. So yeah, any way I can help, that'll be great. And also on closing this, thank you very much for giving guys like us a platform to
No,
be
no,
able to
the
get our
pleasure is
name
all
out. And
mine. I learned so much. Like, it's guys like you that actually share the more information than the people that are out in the media, in the mainstream, because a lot of times people don't realize that most of these people that make it big or like are out there, a lot of small people are behind them. And if
yeah,
you don't get to know their story, you're never going to be able to know what actually went into making these people where they are. So thank you so much for coming on.
no, thank
And
you.
The podcast.